Cantarella is going to be the newest Havoc character releasing in version 2.2 of Wuwa, and she's kind of going to fulfill the same role that our already existing sub DPS buffers like Brant, Rakia, Sanhua, or Zhezhi would, where she's that second slot in your team and you want to make use of their outro buff to maximize the damage on your actual main DPS. Now, how good her damage is and how good her outro buff is and how good her kit is in general, we'll get to in the video. But yeah, cool jellyfish lady, yippee! Starting with her basic and heavy attack, they're both underwhelming abilities that you optimally won't use. However, she does have an enhanced heavy attack, which lets her enter a special state called Mirage. We'll get more into what this state does later on in her kit. But yeah, besides this enhanced heavy attack, you don't really care much about these other two abilities. Moving on to her resonance skill, it has two different forms, the base form and the enhanced form. The base form just dealing a very small amount of damage, while the enhanced form is activated when you're in that Mirage state that I mentioned earlier. It will change the skill to not only dealing increased damage, but also sending the target hit by this enhanced skill into the hazy dream effect. Now what this effect does is it reduces the target's movement speed for 6.5 seconds, which is kind of similar to what Carlotta does when she uses her skill, where you'll notice how the enemies freeze for a little bit. Not the same exact effect, but it fulfills the same type of purpose. When a target takes damage in this hazy dream effect, Jolt will be triggered once, removing this effect and dealing extra havoc damage. However, this Jolt effect can only be triggered if Cantarella herself is the character doing damage, and if a character besides her does damage on an enemy with hazy dream, Jolt will not trigger and hazy dream will just be removed. So you optimally want to make sure you at least hit the enemy once with Cantarella after using your enhanced skill, so you get that extra damage from Jolt. Now the scalings on her enhanced skill and Jolt aren't particularly good. Her enhanced skill has a motion value of 222, which is better than her normal skill, which has a 147 motion value, but a 222% scaling is pretty fucking low, and the scaling on the Jolt damage is also 198% motion value, which is also really low, especially for abilities you're doing once per rotation. The scalings for these abilities being so low is not very good. So yeah, don't expect a lot of damage from this skill. It's honestly pretty mid. Her Forte Circuit is where they kind of put her entire kit. As you can see, it's a really long ability. Starting off with the most important part of her Forte Circuit though, which is the Mirage state, what it does is it will replace her basics, her mid-air attacks, her dodge counters, and her skill with enhanced versions. And when hitting an enemy with these enhanced basic attacks, she will consume 1 stack of trance and obtain 1 stack of shiver, while also healing the entire team. This Mirage state will last for 18 seconds, or it will end when all trance is depleted. And when reaching 3 stacks of shiver in the Mirage state, her skill will get enhanced a second time, doing even more damage than her previous one. It goes from doing 222 motion value to now doing 1335 motion value, which is actually a really good scaling, and it'll be where the majority of her damage comes from. The damage from this ability is also considered basic attack damage, and just like the previous enhanced skill, it will also send the target into hazy dream, but this will also heal the entire team, unlike the previous skill that doesn't heal at all. A really interesting part of this enhanced skill is that it's also considered as casting an echo skill, which might not make sense right now, but makes more sense later on in her kit. The way these trance stacks work is she can hold up to 5 of them, and after casting an intro skill, the 3rd string in her enhanced basics, or her first enhanced resonance skill, will all recover 1 stack of trance, while using her ultimate will recover 3 stacks of trance. Additionally, when she's in the water, she recovers 1 stack of trance every 5 seconds, but usually you're not going to be in the water, so it's just a nice little exploration thing. But unless they make it so Tower of Adversity is just underwater for some reason, then this doesn't really matter. The way her shiver stacks work is she can hold up to 3 of them, and after hitting an enemy with her enhanced basic, she will recover 1 point of shiver as long as she can consume 1 point of trance. So to kind of dumb it down, basically you get trance from a variety of her abilities, her intro, her ult, her skill, and her normal basics. And after having enough of these trance stacks, you'll use your enhanced heavy to enter the Mirage state, and then you'll use her enhanced basics in this Mirage state to convert these trance stacks into shiver stacks, which will allow you to do her 3rd enhanced skill. Technically, because the 3rd enhanced skill only costs 3 shiver, and you can only have 5 trance stacks at once, you don't need to worry about getting 5 trance stacks. As long as you have 3, that'll be enough. So simply doing her intro, her ult, and then her skill will be enough to let you get enough of these stacks. So how much better is the damage for these enhanced abilities? Well, the damage for enhanced basic attacks in this Mirage state is improved from the normal basic string dealing 370 motion value to these enhanced ones dealing 490 motion value, while the mid-air attacks motion value isn't changed at all, weirdly enough, and the dodge counter is improved from 212 motion value to 225 motion value. Now these are all really small multipliers. You're probably noticing a pattern now that this character doesn't really do a lot of damage. It is what it is. An additional part of this Forte Circuit is after casting her intro skill, when any resonator in the team casts an echo skill, it will recover 5 consider energy. This can be triggered up to 4 times and lasts for 25 seconds, while it cannot be triggered multiple times by the same type of echo. Moving on to her ultimate, it also doesn't have a very good multiplier. It has a scaling of 376 motion value, which is pretty goddamn low, especially for an ultimate ability. What this ultimate does is it will deal havoc damage, of course, and after using it, it will inflict a diffusion state on all teammates. What this diffusion state does is when when the on-field character deals damage to a target, it will summon a jellyfish to do a coordinated attack, also dealing havoc damage that's considered as basic attack damage. Pretty much most of Cantarella's kit is considered as basic attack damage, so if you want to increase her damage, you would aim for basic attack damage bonus in your substats optimally. The way these jellyfish work is it's pretty much a carbon copy of Zhezhi's skill. It hits a max of 21 times and lasts for 30 seconds, and it can only hit once every second. So if you were thinking that, oh, this could be better than Zhezhi for stacking up Jinshi, no, it's the exact same. The only difference between these coordinated attacks and Zhezhi's coordinated attacks is they just do a lot less damage. The motion value for Cantarella's coordinated attacks is 14 motion value. Zhezhi has a motion value of 65% on her coordinated attacks, so Zhezhi's coordinated attack damage is almost 5 times better than Cantarella's. And Zhezhi isn't even the highest coordinated attack damage dealer in the game, where Teffy clears both of them. So if you were building her for the sake of dealing a lot of coordinated attack damage, you'd be better off building pretty much any other character. But the fact that she does coordinated attacks at all is nice. It makes her a usable character for Jinshi. However, again, Zhezhi is just better, and sadly you can't use them both because of the way her outro skill works. Her outro skill is a 20% havoc damage amp and 25% skill damage amp for 14 seconds. However, this buff is lost after swapping. It does not work like Shorekeeper or Verina's outro, where it's given to the entire team, so your main DPS can actually get this buff while also getting your other character's buff at the same time. It would have made a lot more sense if they made it so this wasn't lost on swapping, so she could be that third slot replacing Verina or Shorekeeper for a character like Jinshi. But because it works the way it is, currently she is not a replacement to Verina or Shorekeeper in any team, even if she's a healer, and you might think she fulfills the same purpose because of that. She doesn't. Moving on to her weapons, I'm actually going to separate this into two separate playstyles, one being a damage focused playstyle where you aim for just increasing Cantarella's personal damage as much as you can, and a supportive focused playstyle where you're more so just worried about getting her outro skill and buffing up your main DPS for the most damage they can. Starting with the damage focused playstyle, obviously her SIG weapon would be the best option for this playstyle, as it just gives a lot of stats. It has a 72% crit damage main stat, and what the passive does is it gives 12% attack, and after casting an echo skill, after using an intro skill, you will gain 1 stack of this passive, which stacks up to 3 times. Of course, because multiple of Cantarella's abilities are considered as echo skills, she can fully stack this up. Now what these stacks do is 1 stack gives 40% basic attack damage bonus, which is very good because a lot of her abilities are considered as basic attack damage abilities. 2 stacks will give 10% havoc resignor, which is really good. It goes without saying that any type of resignor is always good. And then what 3 stacks do is the 40% basic attack damage bonus and 10% havoc resignor you're getting from these 2 stacks will be retained for 27 seconds after you swap off. This is nice because after you ult on Cantarella, you're naturally going to swap off so you can do your coordinated attacks off field. This makes it so those coordinated attacks are buffed by this weapon. However, if you swap back into Cantarella, you lose these stacks, so you kind of have to make sure you're not swapping in when you shouldn't be and wasting this effect. But yeah, in terms of stats it gives, this weapon is really good. However, currently it is only good for her specifically. We don't have any other rectifiers that can make use of this besides maybe Encore, because she technically can get at least 1 stat because she has an echo. Every character has an echo, so she'll at least get some of the benefits of this weapon. But yeah, besides her and Cantarella herself, this weapon isn't really used on much characters currently. And also, as I've said multiple times, Cantarella's personal damage isn't very good, so I think pulling for this weapon to improve her damage instead of just using a weapon you might already own that can buff your DPS instead would be a better option. Zhezhi's signature is also another good option for Cantarella's personal damage, as she can make use of the basic damage bonus it gives, since her coordinated attacks are considered as basic attack damage. However, to get the full 52% basic attack damage bonus from this weapon, you have to use 3 skills to get 3 stacks, which you technically can do because she has 3 different forms of her skills. She has her normal skill, she has her first enhanced skill, and she has her big enhanced skill. She technically can use this weapon to its full extent, but you have to be more aware of how you're playing to fully get the buff off this weapon. Yinlin's Sig is also another really good stat stick that she can make use of very easily. The standard 5-star rectifier will also just be a decent stat stick, while worse than all the limited weapons. It gives her basic attack damage bonus, it gives her ER, it just gives her stats that she can make use of. And then the battle pass weapon or any decent 4-star stat stick will be a decent option, but at that point I wouldn't opt for a damage focused playstyle, and instead I would opt for a supportive focused one. Now if you opt for a supportive focused playstyle, her best weapon will be Shorekeeper's signature. It works very well for her, even though she doesn't care about the HP percent the passive gives. Energy regen is useful, the concerto energy is useful, and because she has a skill that heals, she can give the 14% attack percent buff to your main DPS, which is a good buff. However, just like the already existing supportive rectifier characters we have, variation will be very fucking good for her, especially at higher refinements. It's just a cracked weapon that is good for support. Free concerto energy is always nice, and energy regen is also good. If you have neither of these, you can use Call of the Abyss. It improves your healing a little bit and it gives you some ER. It's just a nice stat stick, I guess, but like, yeah, it's kind of good. Her best echo set is kind of a no-brainer. It'll be the new Midnight Veil set. She's a Havoc sub DPS / supportive buffer, so she'll want to use the set that buffs Havoc damage. However, if you're playing her in a non-Havoc team, like for example Zhezhi, you can use Moonlit to buff Zhezhi, and if you're opting for a damage focused playstyle, you can use her with a coordinated attack set. However, I wouldn't recommend it, as again her coordinated attack damage isn't very good. She's not like Mortefi where you can run them on the coordinated attack set and just do enough damage to outweigh your buffs. So instead I would just opt for the normal Havoc damage set, since it would buff her big enhanced skill, which is the biggest portion of her damage, and the trigger condition for it is using basic attacks and heavy attacks, which she will do. So this set will synergize with her a lot more than the coordinated attack set would. So when you think about her purpose as a character, her biggest use case seems to just be as an on-field Havoc damage DPS, where you play her with Sanhua or Rakia to buff up her damage. However, because almost all of her abilities have pretty shit multipliers, and her one ability with a pretty good multiplier still isn't even that good compared to other DPSs, she'll just end up being a worse carry than Danjin or Camellia would. She won't be terrible, I'm not saying she's a worthless unit as a damage dealer, but if you already have these alternative characters, there's not really much reason to pull for her to play her as a DPS. And then as for her use cases as a support or sub DPS, it's pretty much the same thing. Because she isn't able to replace Shorekeeper or Verina in any team, that means, for example, if you want to play her with Camellia, Danjin, or Havoc MC, the Havoc DPSs, you'd have to replace your Sanhua, your Rakia, or your Danjin if you're using her as a support, which she's just not better than any of those characters in. For Camellia, Sanhua is just better. Her 38% basic attack damage amp is just better than Cantarella's 20% Havoc damage amp, and Rakia's 20% Havoc damage amp plus 25% basic attack damage amp is also just better. The same also applies for if you wanted to play Danjin or Havoc Rover as your main DPS, Rakia would still just be better. So for pretty much all the Havoc characters, she's pretty much just the last option you'd use. And if we look at skill damage characters, she's also just the last option you'd use. For Zhezhi, she's worse than Zhezhi, and for Carlotta, again, she's worse than Zhezhi, and Brant would also just be better. I'd say the most unique aspect of this character's kit is that multiple of her abilities are considered as echo skills. Her ult and third enhanced skill are considered as echo skills. So if we maybe get a future Havoc damage dealing character that cares about your characters doing a lot of echo skills, maybe she'll see some use and she won't just be a side grade. But in this current iteration of her kit, I honestly can't recommend her. She's just flat out worse than so many other options, and there's really not an outstanding part of her kit that I can go and say, yeah, she's the best at. She's not the best at coordinated attacking, she's not the best at dealing damage, she's not the best at buffing, and while she is really good at healing, she's actually better than Verina at healing. WoWa is a game where you can dodge very often. I've cleared tower multiple times without even needing a healer, so a character doing more healing doesn't really matter when you're playing a game that doesn't really need it. So I'm sorry to say this, because I honestly was pretty hyped for this character. She looks really cool, but to be honest, she's just a mediocre DPS and a okay support if you don't have the other options. But at that point, why not just get those options on their reruns? Because Brant is a character that's coming out in a couple days as of recording this video, he's probably out by the time this video is released. You're probably watching this thinking, oh, should I get Brant or should I get her? Maybe I should save. I'm gonna be completely honest, there's really no reason you should pull this character. If you like Brant and you have teams that Brant is used in, get Brant 100%. If you can't make use of Brant, skip him and skip Cantarella as well. You don't need either of them. Of course, if you really like her, if you want to pull her because she's pretty and you don't give a fuck about what I'm saying, you can go ahead and pull her. She can still work in the teams that she works in, and she'll very likely be able to clear endgame. It's just you only have a limited amount of pulls in this game unless you spend money, and I wouldn't really recommend using those limited pulls on a character that just gives you less value than others. The point of this video is to let you know if she's worth pulling, if she's a good addition to your account. And like I've said multiple times, my verdict on that is that she is not. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on Cantarella. She's sadly a very mediocre character, and I'm not 100% sure if I'll make a video on Arrow Rover, but they're currently also looking to be a mediocre character as well. So this is likely just going to be a filler patch in terms of characters, but honestly I'd say that's a pretty good thing, as a lot of the recent characters have been really fucking good. It's been kind of hard to keep up when you have to get all these characters and all their weapons, and it's just kind of like, you know, we're doing too much. Can I get a patch where I can just save? So it's nice that this is the patch where you can just save. I'm expecting the next characters to be cracked the fuck out, so stay tuned for when we get leaks of the characters after in 2.3. But yeah, sorry if this video was kind of negative. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and say a character is good when they're not. If you want to blame anyone, blame the WoWa devs for making Cantarella mid as fuck, not me.